One of the things that I think you probably all would agree with is we feel like as libertarians, when you have conversations with people on the right, you feel like you're a liberal, and you have conversations with people on the left and they think you're a conservative. And so it feels like we're stuck in the middle, and we have people on the left and people on the right to talk to. My sympathies lie probably more with the left. I can kind of work with them. I have those sympathies probably because that filled in a gap that I didn't get growing up in my faith culture. And so I'm kind of attracted to that. But at the same time, when I read liberals, progressives, talk about, well, Jesus wants us to care for the poor, therefore Obamacare. I'm like, wait, no, what? Big gap for me. So I kind of lean that way to some degree, but I completely think that both the left and the right, and especially the left, honestly, really needs a heavy dose of liberty. So what I want to talk about today is how do we talk to the left and to the right? Before that, though, I want to issue an editor's warning. Norman has told me many times I'm too nice to people, I'm too generous, I'm also too receptive to other people's views. Don't mistake that for I don't have my own opinions or I'm not strongly vocal. If you know me, you know I'm very opinionated, and I will vocalize that very quickly. But I also think it's very important to have a generous conversation with people, so I'll wear this criticism as a badge. I want to give you 3 points for where I kind of go constantly when I'm reading both the left and the right online, whether it's political or even just theological. That is, I would say, my starting points in these conversations. And anytime I feel like I'm becoming attracted to a policy that I'm like, that doesn't seem very libertarian, I start realizing that these are the kinds of things that pull me back to, yes, but liberty is really the way to go. The first one is anything peaceful. I believe that Jesus was nonviolent. I know there's a huge debate on the Christian Libertarian Facebook page, and I understand that that's a debatable part, but I think that if we can't come up with a way to solve a problem that's nonviolent, we can do better. There has to be a better way than just coming up with some sort of aggression, even if it's just a little bit. So I start with anything peaceful. If we're not doing it peacefully, we're doing it wrong. The state does not equal society. When we say we, who are we? I have an article on libertarian Christians on that whole topic. What does that mean? Does it really mean that the state is the conglomeration of all of us and it can make our decisions? No, I don't believe that at all. When people mistake we for institutional action by the state, I think they're making a grave error. And so it's not the only institution in society. Come up with a more peaceful way. That's what again, back to the anything peaceful. And another one is don't tread on anyone. Don't tread on me is very much chastised by the left because they think it's all about selfishness and my rights and my guns and my protection against, anybody else. And, most of us all look at that and say, well, we're really talking a lot about the government. But if you carry all of that out to its logical conclusion, really, don't tread on me means don't tread on anyone, because it's not like we're saying don't tread on me, but I don't care what you do to other people. We're saying I care what you do to other people, and that includes the state. So in some ways, I'm a libertarian for the benefit of other people. I don't like writing the check for taxes, but at the same time, it could be worse, but there's a lot of poor people who their money is not worth very much because of the Federal Reserve. There's a lot of people who can't create businesses because of licensing laws. The government comes in and is a barrier to entry for a lot of people. People need to be defended because they can't defend themselves against the state, or they don't have a way out of a dire situation. So those are kind of the 3 things that I just keep coming back to, and when I talk to those on the left and the right, I bring those up a lot because especially the first one for the people on the left, that really seems to work, because then you can explain how the state is rooted in violence. When having a conversation, because Ron Paul didn't win the election, I kind of lost the illusion that everything's going to get fixed in the next 4 years. I can only take on so much. So when I have a conversation with somebody, it's often online, or it's often in a short conversation at work where we have to do work, so we can't continue discussing politics because that doesn't look good while you're at work, right? Or it may not look favorable upon you. So as we become comfortable talking with other people about liberty and about the solutions that libertarians have to offer, your goals may change. But these are just some starting goals that I've always carried with me. One of them is revising their understanding. How many of us groan when people bring up the straw man, greed is good, or when people bring up, profits before people? It represents a fundamental misunderstanding of terms that we like to use and terms that we feel like we have a pretty good idea. Sometimes I feel like when I read a critique of capitalism, somebody's saying that they don't like snakes because they're furry. And I'm like, wait a second, that's not what a snake is. You're not describing what I feel like is the proper way to have, for commerce and things like that. So revising somebody's understanding is, in a way, getting them to say, I've never really thought of it that way before. And so one example, I work in retail, and sometimes I have to help people take their computer out to their car because, it's a big computer, they're bringing it in. And we're walking through a big box retailer store at the mall, and she was really disgusted with how little they pay. She's like, I just think I'm not going to shop here anymore. And she was talking about a particular individual that worked there that she felt sad for. And I said, well, that's not going to help her if you stop shopping there. And she's like, oh, well, I guess I'll just write a letter to the CEO and express my, disgust. I'm like, that's a better idea. And so she never understood the connection, or she didn't understand. And I was able to very quickly say, hey, have you thought of this unintended consequence? And I think that's another thing that's very difficult for people who look to the state for the solution. And I think one of the things we ought to do is unlock their imagination a bit. Really? 500 to 1,000 elected officials in a single city to dictate to all of us, as Tom Woods calls our wise overlords? You really think that's the solution to healthcare, to security, to all these things? Come on, we can do better than that. We can think better than that. People get locked into, who will build the roads, right? That's like the most popular joke to talk about, because we're just like, oh, really? Seriously? Can you not think more creatively than that? I mean, isn't that what's running all through your minds when someone says who's going to build the roads? How else? This is my example after flying here. I haven't flown in 6 years. How else are we going to keep people safe if we don't, have the TSA touching every part of our body? Really? Can you not think of a better way? So I think in a lot of ways, the internet has become like our best friend, because sometimes you could say, the liberals especially would say, well, people don't have enough information to avoid bad businesses. You know what? 100 years ago, I could say that argument might have made more sense. We've got the internet. Knowledge is ubiquitous. It's not as much of a problem anymore. We have Yelp telling us, don't go to this business. We have all kinds of information available, and we can push that kind of information and really just make the state obsolete in that area. So in particular areas. So we can be demonstrators of a world without boundaries, as Jeffrey Tucker would put it, because we're just a world full of free people doing good, right? We can do that and not have a single institution come in and say, hey, this is how it has to be, this is how we protect people, this is how we take care of people, and so forth. For the right, do you want virtuous people, or do you just want people obeying the right laws? Because I'm pretty sure any conservative would say they want actual virtuous society. They don't just want people going through and obeying laws. So the idea here is to nudge them closer to liberty. Be patient, consider the long haul. The immediate conversation you may be having may not get them to agree with the point you want to make, but if you nudge them a little closer, they can become more libertarian. Now, sometimes that might mean that they become a libertarian in education but not healthcare. Okay, you've made progress there. Sometimes it means they're a libertarian in areas that they're not libertarian enough in a certain area. That's okay. Have you moved them forward toward liberty? And so it's sort of like the Theseus ship. You rebuild it, and at some point maybe they're a libertarian in almost every way, or every way that you would really prefer. So moving people closer is good. But when we talk to people, we need to make sure that we know our audience. That means that we read the things that they value. Wouldn't it be nice if every liberal read Human Action? Big, thick book, love for them to read it. Or go to learnliberty.org and watch some of the short videos. Well, we would really love it if they would read the best of material that we have out there on our side. So we might want to show them a little bit of respect and watch their videos. The story of stuff, right? There's lots of videos countering that video, and I think they're wonderful. But if we're not engaged with the ideas as they're presenting them, we're not going to really reach them, because we're not going to be able to speak back to their ideas. We're going to speak back to what we think their ideas are. So when we want to engage, don't be afraid to read the progressive arguments or watch their videos, because they have a lot of videos out there. Or don't be afraid to read the conservatives talk about, family values. It's not that I'm against family values, but sometimes the types of policy advocacy is not libertarian in any way. So watch the videos, read their books, become familiar with their best arguments, because I know that I've been in conversation with people and I felt, oh my goodness, I am not explaining this well. I wish Steve Horowitz was here or Jeffrey Tucker were here explaining this, because they're so much more eloquent than I am. Well, I bet you any conversation partner you have probably feels the same way. So read what they value. It also shows a bit of respect as well. And also appeal to the best in others. I give people the benefit of the doubt. Not everybody who is progressive just wants full-blown communism and Marxism and are okay with oppression. Most likely, they probably just don't see that their ideas lead that direction, right? And so we have to meet them where they are, but we also can assume the best in people and say, you know what, you probably have some values that we agree with. I don't know any progressive who doesn't talk about, who doesn't have family values, or value the family. They might explain it differently or something like that, but I don't know anybody who says, oh no, we don't believe in family values. So right there you have a connection. So you have to reach them on their own terms and show them that their own goals are probably best accomplished under a free society with more liberty is going to help them accomplish their goals, if that's really what they're all about. So in order to know that, we have to kind of discover their values. So in the long run, in some ways, we might want to change them. We might want to see what would have them. You okay? Okay. In the long run, we may want them to change their values, but that's not where we are right now. When you're having a conversation with somebody, they have values, and those values are what they hold because they've been attracted by them. They might have done tons of research and felt really confident in it. And so if you can start with their values, you can continue working with what they have. And everybody has sort of a preferred palate of food that they like to eat. So to use a little bit of a metaphor going forward, we need to speak to their palate and serve them something that's appetizing, because if our message is not appetizing, they're not going to listen. If it's too much to chew on, like Human Action, they're not going to bite. And if we overuse a particular ingredient, it's just going to become distasteful. So these are some of the things from the progressive palate. If you can demonstrate how the liberty serves the common good, you're going to get their ear. But if you don't value some of these things, we can redefine them. We can talk about the nuances of what it means to talk about equality. We can talk about human rights as property rights. So libertarians, they're not anti this. It's just that sometimes this isn't the type of thing we talk about. And so we can talk about that with those who are on the left, because these aren't bad things. We just have different ideas about what it means to call something good for the commons. Conservatives will have their own little own palate, individual responsibility, American exceptionalism, job growth, religious freedom. And so we can talk to those things. I honestly sometimes feel like it's harder to get the left to embrace liberty. So a lot of my ideas have come from, oh, if you could just see it that way, you could have this, what you want. The idea behind something like job growth, we'll talk about in here just a few minutes. But we also have to recognize that we all have different allergies, and some of these are things that we like to talk about. And if you can recognize the kinds of allergies that people have, that your conversation partners have, it doesn't mean you never talk about it. It doesn't mean that you never use it. But sometimes these kinds of things, like taxation is theft, it's immediately going to turn off almost anybody. There's definite value in understanding the parallels and the reason why we say taxation is theft. But this is not you can't use sound bites as substitute for good reasoning and explaining them. It takes a long time to get from whatever the left and the right believe about taxes to taxation is theft. So if any of you have come from either the right or the left, you probably didn't come to any of these sort of things overnight. And so these ingredients make it difficult to advance conversation. I think that's in part why I have some of them up there. So I apologize that we're like midway toward dinner and I'm putting this up on the slide, but it was a really good picture when I was putting this together. I'm just going to give you a few appetizing talking points and then I'll open it up for questions. But the thing is, give them enough to chew on, but not so much that they gag or have a bad taste in their mouth. Consider the allergies, consider just, there's a mass of information out there, and we have to pick and choose what we present at any given time. And it must be appetizing, so keep that in mind. We're going to talk about 3 layers: point of agreement, a point of challenge, and then we're going to point out unintended consequences. So we're going to just serve a little sandwich, right? So with conservatives, they like to say that job growth is good for the economy. I think we all agree with that, right? But what is often the case is they're very hesitant to talk about exporting jobs. Well, with a little bit of an economic background, or just a little bit more economic knowledge than just this initial, oh my goodness, if that job goes overseas, then what's going to happen? Labor is not a zero-sum game, right? We can learn new things and new habits. Labor is heterogeneous, is a good quote that I use. So we can talk about how actual trade restrictions hurt us. That's an unintended consequence. Or regulation that makes sure that jobs stay here is an unintended consequence. One of the most popular progressives is Jim Wallis, and he says the church should be a prophetic voice to society and the state. And many of the progressives will kind of follow along with that, because in the Bible, there were a lot of prophets who would actually speak out against the things that were not happening in Israel. And what was not happening were things like they didn't have just weights and measures. Their silver had become worthless, and the Common English Bible right after that line says their beer has become diluted. And we all know that that's not a good thing. So if the church is supposed to be prophetic voice to the state, why on earth are progressives not talking about the Federal Reserve? I've actually emailed progressives, and they're like popular ones like Brian McLaren, and he's kind of like, well, everybody's working on their own different things. I'm like, yeah, but like you're really all about making sure that poor people are better off. Why can't we talk about how the Federal Reserve is undermining their ability to actually work, save, and make progress in the world? I think a lot of ways, both the left and the right, their anxiety is fueled by fear and impatience. Fear that if we don't do something, and by we, the government, or a government of some kind, then all hell is going to break loose and the world's going to fall apart. And impatience because if we don't do something right now, all hell is going to break loose and the world is going to fall apart. So I think that's problematic. And if it's really all about fear, like if you're really just worried about who's going to support poor people, and if you're really just worried about who's going to build the roads, all right, fine. If you want to save those two things, how do we delete the other 90%? Because you know what? I'll give you that. If those are the only two things you want to maintain, well, already the state is 90% smaller. Let's talk. So to repurpose a phrase here, I've seen the future and it works. It's a free society. It is not a society that's planned. A free society is the most effective environment to achieve our dreams and aspirations for a better world, because free people are more than capable to cooperate in order to create a better world without coercion.